Okay, excellent. Let's get ready for with day two. Let's review a little bit of what we did yesterday and how it tees up what we're going to be doing today. So today we covered, I'm sorry, yesterday on we covered this area here on day one. We specifically talked about how to search and how to start filtering your data, how to use metadata, how to use keywords to filter down that data that you want to search on. Once we have the logs or the messages that we care about, we talked about parsing, and we could parse whether we parsed in the query itself using operators like the JSON operator or the parse regex, or CSV operators, or we used the field extraction rules. If you guys remember, field extraction rules would parse that data at the time of ingest. So the idea behind it is you want to parse your fields so you can start providing structure to your data. And why do you care for that structure? Well, because at some point you want to start analyzing that data. So we talked about very simple aggregation that we looked at the counts and the sums, or the average, the basic stuff that you expect. But we also talked about some advanced analytics, and we looked at log compare, log reduce, outlier, and a few others. I'll review a few of those, since we're going to be using some of those for today's session. But if anything, what I want you to take from this is that the things that we reviewed yesterday, think of them as stepping stones. We parse, we analyze, so that we can eventually build dashboards, so that we can set up scheduled alerts. This is where the benefit of Sumo Logic comes around. When you start making Sumo Logic work for you, you want to build dashboards that can give you visualizations of your trends, of your critical outliers. You want to start scheduling alerts so that you receive notifications. You don't necessarily want to be searching every single time. So today we're going to focus on this area, how to monitor your data. But I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to move this one to the top. I'm talking about don't start from scratch. You want to take advantage of the out-of-the-box content. So let me start with showing you some of the out-of-the-box content so that you can see how you can easily have this content available. And then I'm going to go back to the drawing board and show you how to build that content from scratch. All right. So with that said, let me switch over to the instance. As I promised yesterday, I will hopefully not be using a lot of slides, and instead I'm going to be showing you a lot of this info just off of the UI. All right. So here is a simple query that I ran yesterday. Remember, we were searching. Let me make this just a little bigger so you guys can see it. Okay. I'm just going to make my browser a little bit bigger. There we go. So here I have a simple query, source category equals Apache access, and I get back my Apache results. Remember, yesterday we ended up creating a query that looked something like this. We said, get me all the messages for Apache access. I really don't care for those that have a status of 200 or 304. As a matter of fact, we came up with a better idea to write this. Remember, we said and status code equals 200 and 304 because this is a lot more efficient from a performance perspective. The more filtering we can put on the first line, the better. Then we did a little bit of time slicing. We counted by status code. We counted by time slice. We can sort if we want to. This is not mandatory, but we ended up doing in this particular case. And then that gave us something that looks like that, which we eventually can start charting. And we'll talk about charting in a second. But my point here is that we came up with this whole query trying to figure out what it is that we wanted to do. Well, here's the beauty. Here's the thing that I wanted to show you about apps and the beauty about apps. Apps have content. So if you go to your library, we haven't talked a whole lot about the library yet, but in short, library is where you store all your queries. If you go to personal, you will see everything that you have saved in your own personal folder. Or if you go to org, you can see anything that someone else has decided to share with you. For example, I can go into Latimer's folder here, and I don't see everything that Latimer has, but I certainly see what Latimer has decided to share with the organization. So remember, personal and org keep the data, keep the stuff that has been keeps your stuff and the stuff that has been shared with you. But the two that I want to point out right now are these ones down here, apps. So the story with apps is these are out-of-the-box content for a lot of common sources. If you notice, Palo Alto Networks, PagerDuty, Nginx, MySQL, VMware, Windows, this has already a whole bunch of dashboards and a whole bunch of queries for things that that we have seen across many of our customers. We were working with Apache data before, so let me show you this one. I'm going to go to Apache, and look, it's showing me that it has a dashboard for an Apache overview, visitor access, visitor locations, visitor traffic. It has a whole bunch of queries that come out of the box that I most likely would want to take advantage of. So, for example, if I am looking at my Apache logs, it's very likely that I will want to look at my critical log messages. So, how do you go about taking advantage of these apps? Well, you select the app that you want, and you just click install. When you click install, you have the option to install this app, but you have to tell it how to identify your Apache data. So in our case, it's kind of simple. We go to the select category, and we say where source category equals Apache access. That's how you're going to be able to identify my Apache data. Or what if you wanted to do something a little more specific? Perhaps you do want to say, maybe you don't want all your source category data because this includes both your dev and your production environment. So perhaps you also want to say, and source, let's say that you have a source that it's called prod something or other, right? So this would ensure that only your production Apache access data is being fed into these apps. So you get the point. You can choose any of these custom filters, or you can just select it from your source category that we're going to do in here. Then it's asking you, okay, what do you want to name this? I'm just going to give it the name Apache app, and it's asking you where in your personal folder do you want to save this Apache app. So I'm going to put it under my apps folder and click on install. And what it's doing right now is it's literally taking this string here, source category equals Apache access, and it's appending it to all the queries and all the dashboards that it's going to install for me, because this is how it's going to identify how to find my Apache data. So notice it's finished installing, and it says, do you want to go see that folder? And there you go. Now, under my personal folder, under the apps folder, there's that Apache app that I just installed. And in that folder are all the items that it installed for me. Let me open a few of these so you can see this. I'm going to click on these and just open it. You notice that it's opening new tabs for each one of these here. I'm just going to open them for now. And while those are opening and loading, let me just go grab one of these. Let's say I'm going to look at this one. I want to see client errors, meaning any 400 response codes that I have per day. If I click on that, it takes me to the query behind it. So here's a really cool thing. I did not have to write any queries. I did not have to create any of this stuff. It literally came out of the box. And it's saying, okay, source category equals Apache access. Here is the first parsing statement, which is parsing my IP address. Here's my second parsing statement, which is grabbing method, URL, status code. Why do we include all this in these queries? Because we don't know if you have actually created a field extraction rule or not yet. So we just include them in here. But in our case, we could even simplify this with that because we know that we already have these fields like status code and whatever other fields we care. So if you look at this, I can run this query now, and I'm going to start getting results for the last 7 days of anything that has a status code that matches a 400 or has a 404 or something like that, 403. And there you go. It starts giving me all my information broken by day. So this is on day 1, it had 120, on day 2, 176, and you get the point. What if I wanted to look for 500s? Well, cool, because I now have a template that I can use. I can just click 5 in here, run that same search. Let me run it for a shorter time period so that we actually get results. I'm just going to run it for 60 minutes, and I'm going to make these time slices to be 1 minute, each of them. So I'm running the same exact query just for a different time frame. Here are my results. Now I'm looking for 500s. And if this is something that I like and I want to save, all I have to do is do a save as, and instead of calling it my 400 errors, it would be my 500 errors, server or client errors. I could give it any detail that I want, and I can save it. So I've shown you how I can take queries that already existed in my installed app. In this case, I took a query called client errors. I can run that query, I can tweak it, and I can save it as something else if I wanted to as well. Okay. All right. Let's go back to those dashboards that I installed. Remember that I had all these dashboards installed and I opened them. Let's take a peek at them. Here you go. It looks like some of them are still loading, but it's showing me a lot of the data that I want to see. Let's go to some of the ones that I have actually already loaded. Look at this one. This is showing me visitor access types. So it's showing me which platforms I'm getting hits from. This is my data. This is my Apache access data that is just flowing into these already existing dashboards. It's showing me if it's coming from Mac, PC, mobile. If you remember, what it's really doing is it's looking at that user agent field and it's parsing it additionally to figure out platforms. It's telling me which popular devices, browsers and operating systems, top 10 PC and Mac versions. If I go here, this one is showing me hits location of my visitors, broken down by country, showing me a map only for the US if I wanted to as well. I can see visitor traffic insights, top refers, top 10 search terms, media types, and all that good stuff. And I can also see some web server operations, server errors, client errors, top 500 client errors, non 200 responses, and you get the point. So the cool thing about this is that, all right, maybe I have some very specific use case. Maybe I want to find out the top 10 clients or the top 500 clients. I don't know, whatever it is. But the great thing about apps is that they meet about 80 or 90% of your needs. So for the most part, you're going to get what you need. Even sometimes you don't know exactly what you want, which you should be looking for in your Apache logs. These apps give you a good idea of where to start. But nothing is keeping you from editing these. Let's go back to here. Let's say that you're not based in the US. Maybe you're based in the UK. And instead of having a worldwide map and a US map, you might want to have a worldwide and a UK map. No worries. All you have to do is you can go to the query behind it. You can edit these dashboards as well, but in this case, I'm going to show you a simpler way to do it for the dashboards themselves. I'm going to go to the search behind that dashboard. So here's the search. Remember, we could even simplify this because we have a field extraction rule. But let's keep it like this for now so I can show you. And you have a lookup operator, and in this case, where country name underscore name equals United States. Let's get rid of that one so that we can see everything that is in there. We see the query now. And let's go back to the table view of that. And we see country name Hungary. There we go, United Kingdom. So all we have to do here is go back to this and say United Kingdom and run our query. Click on Start. Our query should now focus only on UK. Looks like the query is still running. And then if we're happy with the results, once we get them back, we'll have the option to either update the dashboard that we came from. So the system's smart enough to know, am I adding this panel to a whole new dashboard, or am I updating that panel in the existing dashboard where I just came from? For some reason, my query is being a little slow. Let's see. Let me run this again just to make sure. Oh, there we go. All right. So now you notice how it looks like I only have one hit in the UK, but that's all right. Let's go look at the map. Yeah. Oops, still loading. Anyway, we'll let this run, but you get the point. I can then update the dashboard, and it's going to say, okay, do you still want me to keep that relative time, or do you want me to change it? And that is how you can make changes either to existing dashboards or to existing queries and take advantage of all this content that is out of the box. I'm going to close this Apache stuff for now. I just showed you Apache stuff, but I want you to be aware that that it also exists for all of these other apps in here. We have a lot of AWS stuff, Amazon Web Services. We have Akamai, Artifactory, a lot of other AWS stuff, Box, Cisco, and so on and so forth. So quite a few apps to take advantage of. In addition to the apps here, we also have more apps in the preview tab. The reason we have a separation between the preview and the apps is because these are apps that we've released recently, and we're open to feedback. Notice how we point you to the Sumo Logic community. If there is something in these apps that you think might be missing, let us know. We can still, the box is still open. We can still bake your changes into these apps before we move them or before we upgrade them to the apps area. So if you're looking at Salesforce, if you're looking at SQL Server and you find something that that you want us to add, let us know and we can bake it into that. But basically, the takeaway from here is if you have source data, check out our apps, check out the preview apps, take advantage of any of the data that already exists there, and any of the content that exists, and there's no need for you to start from scratch. Okay. Since I'm already in the library, I'm going to talk about two more things that are in here. Favorites is anything that you have starred. So if you star anything, then it's going to show up in your favorites folder. Recents is anything that you have recently run. So here are all my searches that I ran today. There's a few searches that I ran yesterday. This is kind of one of those where, oh, I ran that search yesterday, but I didn't save it. Let me go back to my recent searches and see if I can spot it again. So this allows you to go back a maximum of 3 days and still be able to find stuff that you might have run the previous day that you forgot to save. Pin searches is a pretty cool one. What pin searches allows you to do, and let me just open. Let me show you here how pin searches work. If I go to my search here, and let's say that I'm going to run this same exact query for my browser seems to be having some difficulty. Give me just 1 second. Let me see if I can clean this up a little. There we go. Oh no, it seems to be running. It seems to be having some difficulty displaying. That's okay. Let's not worry about it. So what if I'm running this query for, let's say, the last 30 days? This query might, or even worse, the last 365 days. This query might take a while to run. So one of the things that I can do is I can go over here to the tab and see this little pin here. I can pin it, which means I can give it a particular name. And then when I run that query, it's going to run in the background. I can close my browser, I can go to lunch, I can go to sleep, whatever the case might be. I can come back later on here into pin searches and I will find the query itself and any progress. Is it still running? Is it completed? And it's going to store that query with the results for the next 3 days. Why 3 days? Well, we assume that after 3 days, your data's changed enough that it's probably going to be stale. So we save the pin searches and the recent searches for the next 3 days. Just remember, pin searches is a great tool to run a query and forget it until you need it within the next 3 days. Okay. With all that said, I've shown you apps themselves, so make sure you start taking advantage of those. Let's talk about dashboards and alerts. So how to monitor your data, and this is the last of the 3 topics that we're going to be talking about. We just to make sure, the first topic we talked about was searching and parsing your data. Then yesterday we also talked about data aggregation and analytics. We started with apps today, and the last thing that we're going to talk about is how to monitor your data. And there's 2 aspects to that. One is visualizing your data through dashboards. So you create some charts, you add those panels into your dashboards, and then you have the ability to share those dashboards. So let's find out how that is done. Let's actually create dashboards from scratch. That's going to be a good thing for us. So let me close some of these, and let me open some of the ones that we actually built yesterday. So remember yesterday we had a predict, we had an outlier one that we built. Let's look at the example here. Yeah, there's our outlier. We even had a geo lookup. Remember that? Let's look at the map for that one. And we even created one ourselves. I think we actually did this. We said, here's the bars, but I'm going to tweak this and I'm going to change the series so that I can show my 404s as a line. Remember this diagram, this graph we built yesterday? So charting gives you the ability to choose all these different types of charts, whatever you think is the best way of displaying your data, whether it's a pie chart or whatnot. And then once you have a chart in a way that it's identifying trends and you want to add it to a dashboard, it's as simple as clicking here, add to dashboard. So let's do that. Let's create a brand new dashboard. I'm gonna call this let's call it Apache status codes. Why not? And if I wanted to add it to an existing dashboard, I would do this drop down and I would find out the dashboard I want to add it to. Or if I wanted to add it to a brand new dashboard, I can just do that. Let's call it training dashboard for today. All right. Click on somewhere outside. So this is the name of my brand new dashboard. I'm going to click on add and it's going to go out there and it's going to build my first dashboard. And as you would expect, I have myself a nice dashboard or a nice dashboard that has one panel. I can also add other non-data panels in here. For example, I can add a title, my first dashboard or Apache data, whatever I want to add there as part of the title. I can grab that, I can move it around, I can, the usual stuff, right? I can also, for example, create a text panel. Why would you want to do that? Well, because understanding your data. Very often, you might be the one creating the dashboard, but might not be the necessarily, you might want to share with others and they don't know exactly what they're looking at. So this just gives you a way for sharing dashboards. You can add links if you want it to other dashboards as well. And if you look at submit, here you go. Here is my little info of what this dashboard is all about. I can grab this, I can move it about, and now I've given my end users a little bit more information of what they're looking at. And as simple as that, I've just created a very simple dashboard in here with 3 panels. Let's add a few more since we had a couple of others in here. Let's add this map to our dashboard. So I'm going to go and do the same thing. Click on Add Dashboard. It asks me where I want to put it. Let me call this like my visitor locations and add it. And while that is happening, why don't I also add the other one? What was it called? I think it was the outlier. Let's just add the outlier one as well. Add to dashboard. Let's call it 404 outliers and click on add. Okay, so you've seen how in less than 15 minutes or 10 minutes, I was able to build a very simple dashboard. I can play around and move these different boxes in here to put things where I want. All the usual stuff. It's fairly straightforward. I can move these things. I can enlarge them. I can make them smaller and all that goodie. Let me just clean it up here so that it looks at least symmetrical. And yeah, there you go. I just created my dashboard that has a few fields in it, has a few information. So let's talk a little bit about the dashboards themselves. Let's talk about the options that are available. Well, I'm going to talk about this one. So I showed you how to add panels. You can also toggle. What if you want to be showing this in an operations center? You might want to have this dark theme showing instead. You can, what else can you do? You can toggle back to the light theme. You can delete it. You can start it. You can refresh it. So here, the interesting thing about refreshing is this dashboard is right now set to be an interactive mode, if you will. So in order for you to get updated data, you would have to hit the refresh button, or you would have to choose a different time frame here for all panels. Or if you want to refresh a specific panel, you can go and refresh the time frame from it, right? So this is if you're using this dashboard for investigative purposes. However, let me click on this done editing here. If you want this dashboard to be refreshed on its own because you're going to be displaying it on a large screen in your operations center, then you would want to turn this dashboard into a live mode. And you notice that when you turn into live mode, it basically locks down that time frame, and that's what it's going to live mode on. And it's going to be refreshing that data to be displaying in live mode itself. So you notice right now it's it's running a background to get itself in live mode and be refreshed as needed. Let me take it out of live mode right now so that we can continue editing and I can show you some other options in here. Of course, refresh, full screen, and all that good stuff. All right, let me click on edit so I can continue editing this dashboard. I can share this dashboard as well. If this dashboard right now is shared with no one, but I can say I want to share it with my organization, meaning everyone in my company that has a Sumo Logic login. That's what your organization means. Whitelist. I can specify who I want to whitelist and be able to see this dashboard. Of course, I have to do a little bit of setting up that whitelist, and you can do this under Manage Security. So you can do that. And here is the link that I can share with people so that they can see that dashboard. Or I can make, let me just go back. Or I can make this dashboard completely open to the world, meaning anybody who has a link to this dashboard, to this dashboard will get to see that. Perhaps I want to share this dashboard with my executives, or I want to share them with some customers because I'm tracking some of their data. I can always click on World and share those dashboards with them as well. And here's the link that I can use to share that. Let's say that for now. I'm going to share that dashboard to the world. It says, by the way, this means that you can share it with anyone, and I can say share. And in this case, I had a little error because I haven't set up some policies to allow me to do that kind of stuff. So this is a little bit of check and balances. If you're a user and you say, yeah, I want to share this with the world, but your administrator hasn't set you up to be able to do that, it's a little bit of a gatekeeping mechanism to do that. All right, what else can you do? Here's a very interesting thing, filters. Excuse me. So filters are set up, allow me to set up some filters in here that I might want to say, okay, enter the status code that you care for. Or perhaps I want to add a filter where users can specify their I don't know what else, what their IP address or their the hour of the day or whatever it is that I want them to be able to specify in here. I can add those as filters, and that means that these now serve as templates that various different folks can use, and they can come in here and say, yep, my IP address is 10.10.10.10, and with that, they would run that query and all the dashboards would get refreshed. Of course, there's nothing with source IP 10.10.10.10. That's why I'm getting no results, but you get the point. I have the ability here to specify some filters that people can use to query that data. You can do a little bit of editing here. Perhaps I don't want to call it source underscore IP, but enter the IP address in question. Right, and if maybe I want to put a default value in there or something like that. And I can even specify which panels should this filter apply to. Perhaps I don't want it to apply to this one, and I don't want it to apply to this one, just this one here, or maybe the other way around, right? Maybe like that. I only want it to apply to this one. Excuse me. So you can say which panel you want that data to apply to as well. Okay. All right. So that's how you go about adding filters. And if you're done editing, any user who is using this, if they click on filters, they have the ability to make use of any of the filters that you've specified. Okay, great. So that's in terms of dashboards. If you're in editing mode, you can still do a little bit of editing to your dashboards. You notice how this, when I switch this cogwheel here for each panel, changes if I'm editing mode or not. If I'm in non-editing mode, that's just a magnifying glass so I can expand it. But if I am in editing mode, which means that, then this turns into a little cogwheel which I can click on, and I can perhaps change that chart type to something else if I wanted to. I can make some general changes like I want these things to be stacking, or I want them to be percent. You can change the color, perhaps, of what you're seeing to a different type of colors in there. What you cannot do, and you notice that it's grayed out here, is we do not allow you to change the query in here. And the reason for that is very simple. We don't want you to create a query that actually does not run. You save it, and then you have a broken panel. So what we force you to do, if you really, really, really want to change the query, is the following. You would have to, being in non-editing mode, you actually have to go to the query behind it, the query itself. And we've seen a little bit of this before. Here is my query. Perhaps I don't want to exclude this. Let's say this is the change that I want to do. I'm just going to say, give me all status codes. Here is my new result, and I can say, okay, now I want to update that dashboard. I still want to do it for the last 15 minutes. Hit apply, and what that just did is it reset my panel to have the new data that I was asking for, or the new query behind it. So we force you to go to the query tab, run that query, ensure that the results is exactly what you want, and then be able to come back to the results here and see your data. Okay, so that's what dashboards are all about. Pretty straightforward. Now, question is, let's say that you close this tab, you're outside of this. How do you find your dashboards? Well, if you guys remember, you can always go to your library. You can go to your personal, and somewhere in your personals, probably under in here, you would find, in personal, there is your training dashboard. You have the ability to share that dashboard. So you notice here it's not published, so you can share that dashboard. You can publish it. Now that dashboard has been published, and it's shared with other people in my organization as well. What else can I do with that dashboard? I can unpublish it. I can copy it, move it, delete it. I can export it if I want to. I can look at the info for that dashboard as well. So there you go. That dashboard lives now in my library. Okay. So now now that you've seen dashboards, let's talk a little bit about alerts. In short, alerts are a way to receive notifications of your critical events, right? What alerts really are at the end of the day is just the same searches that you've had before, except that now we're going to schedule those searches. So let's go back to the UI and let's talk a little bit about how you schedule those searches. Let's go back to the search. As a matter of fact, I'm going to start with one that we looked at before. Let me just close some of these ones in here. All right. Remember this search that we ran yesterday, and basically this search is saying, I'm going to run Apache Access. I'm going to look only for those messages that have a status code of 404, and then I'm going to count the number of messages that I have that have a status code of 404, and I'm going to save that as server error count. So I'm just creating a new variable called server error count that has a count of all my messages that have errors. And then I'm using the Outlier operator so that it can create something like this. It creates, actually, let me go first to this view. There's my server count, but the Outlier operator creates an upper, a lower, an error, an indicator, a violation, a mean, and all that good stuff, right? It also, I can specify things like the window, how many messages, how many data points should I go back to find out what the standard deviation should be now. Consecutive, how many errors should there be, consecutive errors should there be for me to flag them as an error? Threshold, how many standard deviations do you want to be looking at? Let's say we do 5. So if we do 5 here, let's look at our at our line chart here in just a second once the search is done. And we will be able to see how many data points are outside of that standard deviation. Looks like it's taking quite a bit of time. I'm not sure why this is happening. And direction means, do you want me to show you all the messages that are above the threshold and below the threshold, or just the messages that are below the threshold itself? Not exactly sure what's going on. This was running earlier and no problem, so I'm not sure if I'm losing, if I'm having internet issues or what. Okay, not good. Let me just open this up as another query. Well, what I wanted to show you is that yesterday, what we did is we said, okay, whenever we are having an issue with the threshold, we were just going to put a where clause, and that where clause was going to allow me to just return results if we had a violation in our query, meaning that the threshold was above 5. Not sure what's going on. This should come back pretty easily. Let me do. Oh no! If I kill that, I kill the webinar, so I can't even do that. Sometimes I have issues with the with this thing, but it doesn't seem to be that. Okay, let me just try something here quickly. Can it go to that page? It can. Okay, so I'm not necessarily having issues with my. Um, Sorry guys, I'm not entirely sure what's happening. It seems like there we go. Okay, not sure what that was all about. Okay, anyway, if you guys notice here, I have one violation, and the way that I can identify that one is if I go back to that table, you will see that I have something called server error count violation. Let me grab that field here for just a second. And what I can do is I can just add a where clause and say where this thing is greater than 0. So if I ever have a violation, I'm actually going to get some results returned in here. If I never have a violation, guess what? I'm just not going to have a result, and things are going to be good. So what I'm going to show you now is how do you set up an alert? How do you say, hey, if I ever have a violation in 404, please alert me. First, you create a query like this, and you look for violations, right? And then the next thing that you want to do is you want to save that query. So in this case, I could save it as Outlier example scheduled search or alert, whatever I want to call it. And then down here, after you save it, you come back to this screen, and down here at the bottom, you have the ability to schedule this search. Let me show you how to do it. The mechanics for scheduling a search are super easy. It's very, very easy to schedule a search. What's more interesting is how you set up your search to actually identify those outliers. So let me just show you the mechanics first. I go in here and I say, okay, I want this to be running, let's say, every hour, and I wanted to be looking at 60 minutes worth of data. So this is saying every hour, look for the last 60 minutes worth of data. Then go to the next hour and look for those previous 60 minutes. Go to the next hour, looks for those 60 previous minutes. It's going to run on whatever time zone that you want to choose in here, including your browser's default time zone. And then you can tell it, okay, here's the alert condition itself. Send me a notification every time a search is complete. Probably not that smart. I'd rather set up a condition and send me an alert if the following condition is met. So in here, I can say, only send me an alert if the number of results is greater than 0. Why is this condition going to work? Because we have this where clause over here. Remember the where clause saying, if I have a violation, then give me results. If I don't have a violation, I don't want results. Therefore, if I don't have results, nothing gets triggered. I only get triggers if the number of results is greater than 0. And if that's the case, then I have the ability to send myself an alert. Let's say that I want to send it to myself or some distribution list. I can do that here, Sumo. And I can specify the email subject. So if you notice here in help, I have a few variables that I can set up. So I can customize that email subject with some of these variables. So the alert condition, the fire time, the number of results, the search name, the time range. I can specify that in here. And I can even include the search in the email itself. I can include this result set. I can include that histogram, that blue histogram that we always get on the searches. I can even include the results of the CSV attachment. There is a maximum there of how we can do it, because we don't want you to use this as a replacement for the export function that we have out in the UI itself. So this is just if you got a small number of results and you want to export them in here. So if you notice, it's incredibly easy. It's super, super easy to set up an alert itself. In this case, we set up the condition, and then we set the alert type, and we specify the details. Now, you might be wondering, well, what other types can we do? So there's two things I want to cover here. One is what other types are available, which are here, and I'll walk you through them in just a second. And the other one is how do we create meaningful alerts? So let me start with the first one, which is the easiest. What other alert types are available? The first one shown here is script action. And what script action allows you to do is it allows you to run a script of your choice, a custom script of yours. uh, Only you know the content of the script, but you have to specify to us where is that script found and how do we call that script. So in this case, I have a one script set up for me. It's called my restart Apache server script, and it happens to be on my machine here. But the way that we set this up, and by the way, setting up the script itself is an admin function. Using the script can be done by anyone in the organization. So the way that it works is if you go to your collection and if you have an installed collector, so that is the one caveat that you have to have some sort of an installed collector in order for you to be able to take advantage of this feature. You can add what we call a script action. And if you add that script action, you just specify whatever whatever name you want to give that thing, any description if you want, and then you tell us, okay, this is a, let's say, Perl script, and the Perl script is called Mario.pl for now. Um, and then I can specify some sort of working directory, which is a place where if I wanted to use the results of the search, Sumo Logic will drop a copy of the results into this working directory, and it's just a file in JSON format. So your script, in this case Mario.pl, could go to that directory, grab those results, and do whatever you want with those results. So it's just a way for us to give you the capability of triggering a script from the from an alert itself. Okay. The other things that you can do let me go back to this. I'm just going to go through the motions here to schedule this for you. All right. The other alert types that we have is ServiceNow. ServiceNow is a ticketing system very similar to Jira, and we just have a tight integration with them that allows Sumo Logic to open an incident in ServiceNow. But if you don't have ServiceNow, this might not necessarily be interesting to you. If you do have ServiceNow, I invite you to just check out our documentation. It's very detailed and straightforward to set up this integration. There's two more in here. I'm going to talk about the last one first, and then we'll talk about this one here. Save to index. What this allows me to do is, if I have a query, it allows me to save the results of that query into its own index. So if I just call that index, I don't know, status codes or errors, and click on save, what I will be able to do later on is I can run a query that says index equals error and whatever other stuff I want to do. But basically, I can go back to that index and run additional queries against that small index that I have just built. All right, good. Let me talk about the last one, which was webhook. And you actually have already seen how that was done. Let me show you how those connections get set up first and then how they get used. This is an administrative function. You have to be an administrator to have the ability to create a connection. But basically, you go in here and you say add, and we have starters for you in terms of some of the connections that you can use. So if you're using Slack, we know what the payload looks like for Slack. So we just get you started in here so you can use that. But if you have some other REST API, any REST API, essentially any tool that has a REST API, you can just go in here, create the payload, test the connection, save it. And once that connection is saved, it will be listed here as one of the connections that you can use. So if you built that connection, when you have your when you're scheduling your search, let's just go here to schedule search. Let's say that this is hourly, and you go in here and you say, I want to use a webhook. Then you will see here that you have the different connections available to you, which you can even do additional customizing in here if you need to. Perhaps I'm going to call this Sumo Logic bot, right? and all that detail. Specify my authentication token, click on save, and now this alert is all set up to be able to send that to a Slack or PagerDuty or whatever I want. So that's in terms of the alerts. Those are the different ways that you can send alerts. Now, let me talk. The last thing I want to bring up in terms of alerts is meaningful alerts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a different alert that I have here that I want to share with you. So I'm going to go into training queries, and I'm going to open this one here called the Outlier alert example. All right. So in this one, here is what I'm doing. I'm going to walk you through it first, and then we're going to, well, actually, let me run it, and then I'll walk you through what it's doing. So first step is pretty straightforward. I'm pulling all my Apache Access data. The second step is I'm parsing. It looks pretty unwieldy, but we all know now that parsing is pretty straightforward. As a matter of fact, I can even get rid of it because I have a field extraction rule, right? Then I'm time slicing by 1 minute. We all know how to do that. And now, you haven't seen this, but I'm sure you're figuring it out pretty easily now. We're saying if the status code matches a 200, then create two new fields, one called success and one called fail. All I'm doing is, since I have a bunch of status codes that are coming out of this, I'm just saying if I have something that matches this, I want it to be a success and I want this to be a failure. I'm really focusing just on my 200s. As a matter of fact, I could have simplified this to be this. If status code matches 200, I just wanted to show you that you have another operator here called the match operator or the matches operator, but um, you could have done this as well, which is a little more, it performs a lot better. And by the way, because it is a number, you don't even need this quote in here as well. So I could have easily done this. If I wanted to even improve the how this query runs, I would have even done this, right? Because remember that that status code, status code, that these fields already exist. Um, I can even do this so that I don't pull all the other status codes. I really just care about these ones. So this is going to perform even better. Now I'm saying, okay, only bring out the messages that have status code of 200 and 400. Now, if if it's a 200, create a new field that has a 1 for successes. And if it is a status code that matches 400, I'm sorry, I should have said 44, then set a 1 for fails. Let's look at what that looks like. Let me comment these other ones out for you so you can see what that does. I'm going to run that, and what I'm going to get is a whole bunch of messages. I think there's something going on with my environment because this is taking way too long. But basically, it's going to give me a whole bunch of messages that have ones and zeros for my success and my fail. So now, if I sum those successes, those whole bunch of ones, it's going to give me a count of the number of my successes. If I sum up all the ones that are stored in the fails variable, it's going to give me a new variable called fail count that is going to have uh, it's going to give me the count of all my 404s. And I'm doing this by time slice. I don't know what's going on with this. Clearly something in the, let me just run this one more time and see if it does any help. Anyway, I'm then taking that fail count and I'm dividing it by my success count, and that's going to be my failure rate. So I'm essentially figuring out if I had a spike into hundreds, do I also have a spike in 404s? And if so, this ratio should stay flat, meaning my failure rate should be very similar. But if I have a spike in 404s and I don't have a spike in 200s, meaning that I really, now essentially what I'm doing is I'm looking at my 404s in the context of my traffic in general, in the context of my 200s. And if that traffic is spiking more for my 404s, then failure rate is going to note that. So I'm really doing an outlier on failure rate now. So notice this. Here's my success count. Here's my failure count. Here's my failure rate. So this is the guy that I'm like keeping an eye on now because that's the one I want to see. Um, and I apologize. I don't know what's going on with this thing. But I'm essentially doing a an outlier on that failure rate itself and looking at those values, and I can then plot them and start seeing if I'm seeing some uh, hmm this is behaving terribly, guys. I'm terribly sorry for this, but it's not even bringing back enough um, it's not bringing back enough um, data points. Uh, okay, let's see. I'm just checking my query to see if everything is correct. If status code equals 200, if status code equals 404. Yeah, that seems fine. Time slice. I don't even need this field here. I'm doing like real-time troubleshooting now with you guys. But anyway, oh, I'm sorry. I already have this where clause in here. That's why this is happening. Okay, apologies. So um, now, if I do this outlier, what it's doing is bringing back all the different fields, and I can see in here if I have some outliers according to my threshold of 3. This looks pretty flat, but I could always play with changing the axes and plotting some values in here. I'm not going to play with it because it's probably going to take me a while to figure out what the scale should be. But you see that I have some outliers here that are popping up. Again, all I have to do is add a where clause, and then I will start identifying only those where I've had a violation, and I can see that there's a few violations in here. I can go through the exact same motion of saving it. Now, you know the mechanics exactly of how to do this. Um, what I want to get to is the fact that this query is a lot more meaningful than this query that we were running before. This one just looks at status codes 404s. And if there's a spike, it's going to let you know. But if there is a spike of 404s and there's also a spike of 200s, in reality, that's a false positive, if you will, right? You really don't need to take action because my 404s uh, spiked because I just had more traffic. However, this one is a lot more meaningful because this is looking at the 404s in the context of my 200s. If my 404s spike but my 200s don't, then failure rate is clearly going to show that and it's going to let me know about it. So here is a much more meaningful solution for that. And by the way, one of the things that haven't shown today is community. Community is our tool, or we call it Sumo Dojo, but essentially it's our community where there's a whole bunch of questions and answers and posts, just like any forums that you've seen out there. There is one, if you just do a quick search for Outlier, you will notice that I actually have posted in here. There we go, creating meaningful alerts. So here is that exact same query that I just walked you guys through. It's right here. Here's a little example of here a little explanation of why this makes meaningful queries. So what I would suggest to you guys is when you get a chance, definitely go to community, check it out. A lot of very interesting information in here, including if you go search for query library, this has a whole bunch of queries that can serve as templates for you to start doing your searches in there. Both suggested by us. There you see myself suggesting a query, as well as some customers putting some questions or queries that are very relevant and meaningful to you. So under help community, you'll find a lot of that information. Okay, last thing I'm going to cover today. I've talked a lot about logs, about getting your logs, about doing dashboards, about creating notifications and all that good stuff. And one of the things that I haven't talked too much about is metrics themselves. I led this I led the this yesterday's session with a demo showing you how to get metrics into the system. So you guys recall that I had the ability to go into my metrics tab and start looking at creating metrics, at plotting metrics. What we haven't necessarily talked about is which kind of metrics can I bring in here. So let me, at a high level, review that, and then we'll open it up to questions. But if you notice, I can use a syntax very similar. Source cat equals host metrics. I only want metrics from this particular host. This is the particular metric that I want to use. Let's say that I wanted all CPU metrics. I could do that as well. I can say CPU star, and then it's going to go and grab me all the different. Let me turn this one off here for just a second. I can go get all the different metrics that have CPU. If you notice, there's CPU idle, there is CPU user, there is CPU admin, and so on, and you get the point. If I click on any of those, it's showing me the outliers for, it shows me just that particular line and the outliers for that particular place. I can go play with how many outliers do I want to see? Do I want to see just the top 10, just the top three? And essentially, what's the threshold to showing those outliers? 2 standard deviations, 3 standard deviations. So the same functionality that I've been showing you in the log worlds, except that here we're seeing it a lot more visual and a lot easier to set up. This functionality that I'm showing in here is going to make it over to the logs world in the very near future. So they'll have a seamless way of doing this stuff. But essentially, a lot of the same functionality that you saw before, we're driving here for you, right? Okay, so what I haven't talked about is which metrics can you bring in. So at a high level, there's 3 metrics, 3 main areas that you can bring in. You can bring your host metrics, so your CPU, uh, your network information, anything that has to do with your host metrics. We can bring that from Windows, from Mac, and from Linux environments, and we can also bring them from AWS ECS environments as well. We can bring your AWS metrics. Those are brought through CloudWatch. So essentially, all metrics get sent to AWS CloudWatch, and we have a plugin into AWS CloudWatch to pull all those metrics into Sumo. And by the way, I'm going to be sharing these slides as well as this recording. Here are links to webinars showing you how to set up these various different types of metrics. And the last one to talk about is graphite compatible. So if you're using like a drop wizard or a stats D or something like a collect D already, this is a way of getting these graphite compatible, graphite formatted metrics into Sumo Logic as well, so that you can end up pulling those metrics into Sumo and doing the similar situation in here. All that, all right? So I know I've covered quite a bit today. Let me just summarize this for you. In short, in the last 2 days, I've shown you how to search, I've shown you how to filter, how to parse and analyze your data using our operators. There's tons of operators out there, but remember, there's always a cheat sheet here that can help you with that. If you go to help documentation, it's going to, in here, as a matter of fact, in here, you could just search for cheat sheet. And if you do that, there is a whole cheat sheet of your operators in here that can show you everything that's available, along with a description, along with a little example of how to use it. And if you want a little more information on how to use any of those, all you have to do is click on the name. Perhaps I want to learn how to use percentile. I can click on that, and it's going to take me to a page showing me some syntax, some of the rules, some of the examples of how to use it, and so on. All right. We've seen how to visualize your data through charts and dashboards. So I cannot stress enough that searching, filtering, parsing, and analyzing is a stepping stone. At the end of the day, create those dashboards, create those scheduled searches, make the system work for you so that you can sit back and focus on other stuff. Make the system get you the data that you want to get on a regular basis. I'm going to add here a couple of call to action items. The first one is, as much as you can, start parsing your data so you can give it structure, or work with your system administrator so they can set up the right field extraction rules for your popular data sources. Can't stress that enough. This is what makes it easier for you to start analyzing your data. The second one is, don't stop at searches. Don't stop at filtering and parsing. Build your dashboards, build your schedule your alerts so that you can make the system work for you. And the last one, I probably don't have to tell you this, but just remember there's a lot of apps out there. Take advantage of them. Don't start from scratch. Make sure that you're using some of the stuff that we've already built for you, and it's going to make it a lot easier for you. All right. With that in mind, let me open it up to questions. And while I wait for questions, let me just say that there's a lot of resources here available for you. There's the training resources, there's the documentation, of course. I talked a little bit about the community. And if all else fails, of course, you can open a support case by going to support.sumologic.com where we can help you with any other stuff. And last but not least, any great ideas, let us know. Log a feature. We'd love to hear from you and understand where you think we can help. All right?